Celtic are through to the last 16 of the Scottish Cup, and while the scoreboard shows a 2-goals-to-0 victory, anyone who sat through the full 90 minutes knows it was far from a comfortable afternoon. This was one of those ties where the priority was simply to get the job done, avoid embarrassment, and move on as quickly as possible. There was never a sense of celebration around the performance, more a quiet relief that the name Celtic would be in the next round draw. From the opening stages, the pattern of the game was exactly what everyone expected. Celtic dominated possession almost entirely, camped themselves in the opposition half, and spent long spells circulating the ball around the edge of the Oakin Lake Talbot penalty area. What stood out, though, was how difficult it was to turn that territorial control into genuine goal-scoring chances. The tempo was often slow, the movement ahead of the ball lacked sharpness, and too many attacks broke down before reaching a decisive moment. Matches like this are always awkward for a club of Celtic's size. There is very little to gain because winning is the bare minimum expectation, but there is so much to lose if things go wrong. That sense of caution seemed to seep into the performance. Celtic looked controlled and safe, but rarely explosive. Defensively, there was almost nothing to worry about, yet offensively, there was a feeling of restraint, as if the team were constantly wary of making the one mistake that could turn the narrative against them. Breaking down a well-drilled, deep-lying defense proved to be the main challenge. Oakin Lake Talbot stayed compact, kept their shape, and forced Celtic into wide areas. Crosses came in, shots were taken from distance, but clear-cut chances were at a premium. Even with the sheer volume of possession, the goalkeeper was not worked nearly as often as you would expect in a tie like this, which only added to the sense of frustration in the stands. The number of changes made to the starting 11 also played a role in how the match unfolded. With so many players coming into the side, some of them lacking regular minutes, the fluency just was not there. Passes were slightly off, runs were not always anticipated, and combinations that normally look automatic felt disjointed. It was understandable to a point, but it also underlined how hard it is to simply rotate heavily and expect the same level of performance. For several squad players, this was a real opportunity to stake a claim, to show that they deserve more trust when the big matches come around. Instead, the overall impression was that confidence is in short supply. A few early mistakes seemed to weigh heavily, and rather than growing into the game, some players became more hesitant as it went on. That lack of conviction in the final third was impossible to ignore. At the same time, credit has to be given to the opposition. Oakin Lake Talbot approached the game with discipline, belief, and impressive fitness. They did not collapse after conceding, they did not lose their shape, and they continued to compete for every second ball right to the final whistle. For a side operating well below Celtic's level, their organization and commitment made this far from a simple afternoon. Another positive for Celtic was getting through the tie without any major injuries. In a season where the squad already feels stretched, that matters enormously. Games on heavy pitches against physical opponents can quickly turn into nightmares, and avoiding that scenario is sometimes just as valuable as the performance itself. The opening goal eased nerves, but did not completely change the dynamic of the match. Celtic remained on top, but the second goal was needed to finally kill off any lingering doubt. Even then, there was no real sense of momentum building. The match drifted toward its conclusion without ever feeling like it might open up into something more comfortable or convincing. What lingered most after the final whistle was the broader question of confidence within the squad. There was a visible difference between players who play regularly and those on the fringes. Sharpness, decision-making, and bravery on the ball all seemed affected by a lack of rhythm. It helps explain why certain selections continue to be relied upon, even when supporters are desperate to see something different. In the end, Celtic avoided becoming another Scottish Cup story about a giant brought down by complacency. They advanced, rotated the squad, and kept control of the tie from start to finish. It was not pretty, and it was never likely to be remembered as a classic, but it served its basic purpose. This kind of match is also a reminder that dominance on paper does not always translate into an easy afternoon on the pitch. Organization and collective effort can narrow the gap for long periods, especially when the favorite cannot find top gear. For Celtic, the lesson is clear that higher levels of intensity and creativity will be required when the standard of opposition rises. With qualification secured, attention naturally begins to shift toward the challenges ahead, where performances like this will not be enough. What this game leaves behind is not excitement, but a sense of obligation fulfilled, mixed with plenty of questions about depth, confidence, and how ready this group really is for the tests that are coming next. As the focus moves beyond the 90 minutes themselves, the wider context of the result becomes impossible to ignore. This tie sat awkwardly in the middle of a demanding period, and while the performance left plenty to debate, the timing of the match may ultimately define how it is remembered. Celtic needed progression above all else, and that box has been ticked, even if the manner of it raised more questions than answers about where this squad truly stands right now. One moment that stood out, perhaps more than it should have, was the amount of time certain key players spent on the pitch. Seeing Callum McGregor involved for almost the entire match was unsettling for many watching. In a game where rotation was clearly the intention, the risk attached to keeping such an influential figure out there for so long felt unnecessary. His importance to the structure, tempo, and leadership of the team cannot be overstated, and any setback would have consequences far beyond this single cup tie. Up front, the goals themselves told an interesting story. Johnny Kenny finding the net again will be welcomed, especially after a spell where confidence has clearly been fragile. Strikers live on moments, and even in a game where his overall contribution, divided opinion putting the ball in the back of the net matters. There were other moments too, chances that almost turned into something more, decisions that went against him, and situations where a slightly different outcome could have changed the post-match mood entirely. That is one of the strange realities of games like this. A marginal offside call, a penalty decision not given, or a shot that clips the inside of the post instead of drifting wide can dramatically alter how a performance is judged. Had the scoreline stretched to 3 or 4 goals, the conversation would likely be far softer. Instead, the narrow margin kept scrutiny firmly fixed on what Celtic failed to do rather than what they achieved. There was also something revealing in how confidence, or the lack of it, spread across the pitch. Early misses seemed to drain belief rather than fuel determination. Players looked less willing to take responsibility, opting for safer passes instead of risking the decisive action. In isolation, those decisions make sense, but collectively, they contribute to a performance that feels flat and predictable, even when control of the game is never in doubt. This is where the discussion around squad depth becomes unavoidable. The gap between the regular starters and those on the fringes felt clear. not in effort or attitude, but in sharpness and composure. That reality explains why certain players continue to start week after week, despite calls for rotation or change. Trust is built on reliability, and right now that reliability appears limited to a relatively small core of the squad. At the same time, it would be unfair to ignore the circumstances. A heavily rotated side, players unfamiliar with each other, a physical opponent, and a pitch that did not encourage quick passing all combined to lower the overall quality of the spectacle. Expecting fluency under those conditions may be unrealistic, but expecting greater authority and creativity is not unreasonable either. What perhaps lingered most was the sense that Celtic never truly found their rhythm. Even after taking the lead, there was no surge, no period where the opposition looked overwhelmed. The game remained controlled, but subdued, professional, but restrained. That might be enough on a cold cup afternoon against lower league opposition, but it does little to inspire confidence ahead of far more demanding fixtures. Attention inevitably turns to what comes next, and this is where the importance of simply getting through this match begins to show. A huge European night looms, followed closely by a critical domestic league clash. The balance between managing minutes, protecting key players, and maintaining momentum becomes incredibly delicate. Performances like this add to the uncertainty around how well the squad can handle those pressures simultaneously. In Europe, the margin for error is razor thin. The lack of cutting edge seen in this cup tie will not be forgiven at that level. Chances come less frequently, space is harder to find, and hesitation is punished. If Celtic are to compete, let alone progress, the attacking play must become sharper, braver, and more ruthless than what was on display here. Domestically, the stakes are arguably even higher. League points carry long-term consequences, and dropping ground now would be far more damaging than an unconvincing cup performance. The upcoming fixtures will demand intensity, belief, and a clear sense of identity, something that has occasionally felt blurred in recent weeks. There is also the ongoing background noise around transfers, which inevitably influences how performances are viewed. Supporters watch games like this not only to see progression in the competition, but to assess who can be trusted moving forward. When opportunities arise and are not fully taken, it strengthens the argument that reinforcements are needed, not just for depth, but for genuine competition in key areas. Leadership, too, becomes a talking point. In matches where quality alone should be enough, leadership helps turn dominance into control and control into goals. While there were moments of calm and organization, there was little in the way of urgency from the sidelines or on the pitch that suggested a collective desire to finish the contest early and decisively. None of this erases the basic fact that Celtic did what was required. The name is in the hat, the journey continues, and there is no embarrassing chapter added to the club's cup history. But football is rarely judged purely on outcomes. Performances shape expectations, and expectations shape pressure, especially at a club where success is not a bonus, but a demand. This second phase of the conversation around the game is less about the 90 minutes themselves and more about what they revealed. The thin margins in confidence, the reliance on certain individuals, the limitations of rotation, and the growing sense that every upcoming fixture carries weight beyond its own result, all came into sharper focus. As the schedule tightens and the challenges intensify, Celtic will need to find more than just results. They will need conviction, clarity, and a renewed sharpness that was missing for long stretches here. This match may quickly fade from memory, but the themes it exposed are unlikely to disappear anytime soon. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Whispers have been swirling round Parkhead after what is being talked up as a leaked audio from Lennoxtown, and folk close to the squad say it's no pretty. The voice, widely believed to be Martin O'Neill's, is said to tear into the players after a limp training session, branding them a bunch of cowards and warning that even the captain is no beyond the cold shoulder. If true, it paints a picture of a gaffer who's had enough of half measures and is ready to rattle cages to get a reaction. O'Neill, the Northern Irish legend who's back in the Celtic dugout, has always traded on fire and standards. Those who ken his methods say he demands bravery on the ball and steel without it, and anything less gets short shrift. The alleged rant suggests patience is wearing thin, with murmurs that senior figures have been pulled aside and told reputations count for hee-haw if the intensity dips. There's talk the armband could be a burden rather than a shield, and that a shocker mission is being weighed up to prove a point. Inside the dressing room, the mood is said to be edgy. Some players are said to have bristled at the language, while others reckon it's the kick up the backside that's been coming. Training ground rows are nothing new in football, but when a manager of O'Neill's stature lays it on thick, it tends to echo. Supporters, meanwhile, are split between backing the gaffer's hard line and worrying about fractures at a delicate moment of the campaign. Celtic sources won't confirm the audio, and officially it's business as usual. Still, the rumor alone has sparked debate about leadership, nerve, and whether tough love can spark a revival. In Glasgow, speculation is part of the air you breathe, and until the noise dies down, every team sheet and body language will be poured over for signs that the threat was real and that the message has landed. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.